Payday 3 is on its final stand. Or I should be saying that it's their last stand before their fall. Payday 3 is a game that has many potential and the opportunity to become one of the best heisting games in the world, even to the point where it can beat Payday 2. I, and amongst other players in Payday 3, won't lose hope or even give up on the game until it is entirely dead. Payday 3 is a dying game, as much as I hate to admit. However, I do genuinely believe this game can be revived and become a far better game. And on this video I'll be talking about the positives, the negatives, and certain mechanics that needs changing or added, and to overall give up my personal opinion on the game being saved. But right now, the way I see it, the game is a patient that is slowly fading away. We are the bandages and the devs itself are the doctors. If the devs try to fix the game with just tiny bandages, it won't save it, but if the devs take the time and use actual bandages for the wounds, it can be saved and revived to become a far greater game. But before I talk about the positives and the negative sides of Payday 3, let me say this. The only reason Payday 2 is popular to begin with is because of its 10-year worth of content. I know the devs had so much time to learn from their mistakes in the past and had time to add and make the game great, but hey, at least it's not like Cyberpunk when it was released. And because 70% of Payday 2's player base have no functioning neurons in their fucking skull and are impatient as shit, they failed to realize that Payday 2 was a completely horrid game at launch. And yes, I am comparing two games that are like decades years different, but fuck off. Sure, there are certain mechanics that should have been added to Payday 3 at launch, but this is the same thing with Payday 2 when it was first released. But let's forget about it. People nowadays don't even have the patience to wait for at least 1 month, which completely baffles me because I am someone that is willing to wait for an update even if it takes months or even years. And even if they do update the game by adding something new or adding some sort of quality of life changes, the player base will do nothing but bitch about it and start fucking whining about it and be ungrateful about it and start complaining about it online, which is absurd. But let's forget about it. Payday 3 has many potential to become better in the future. The reason I believe in this is because Starbreeze is a company that likes to try out new features and add interesting stuff to their fans. But because the player base are literally just constantly barging them with negativity, and sometimes I've even seen them send death threats to the devs, which is fucking wrong. And not only that, it makes it harder for the devs to even do something. It's like, sure, there are certain genuine players that love the game, that give out actual genuine critiques and give out their concerns, but because there's like degenerates that just spit out negativity 99% of the time, makes it harder for the devs to even understand what the player base wants. And it's one of the reasons that the game's reputation is slowly falling apart. I'm not saying that it's the fans' fault entirely, but in some way it is, in a certain way, because there's nothing but negativity every fucking time that Payday 3 tries to tweet something funny. But let's go back into the topic. Can Payday 3 be saved? I do genuinely believe that Payday can be saved, but it needs time to improve. At the moment, it is sadly slowly fading away, and if there are no updates coming this month or any sort of huge update, as much as I hate to admit it, but it might actually genuinely die. God damn it, that fucking voice crack. But I doubt the game will die right now, or even soon, because it is too early for it to die, and I do genuinely believe the game can actually rise up and be far superior than release. I feel like the game will be in a position where the player numbers are now on the edge of death, but a year later the numbers will greatly increase and be in a more healthier position. Take example being Dying Light 2. When it was first released, everyone claimed it to be a buggy mess. The lowest player count it had was at least 1.5k players on average. And because a lot of people kept constantly saying it was dead, but a miracle happened. A year later, it averages around 6,000 or even more players. This is something I believe can happen with Payday 3. Where at the moment, the player count is at 400 at average, but a year later, I do believe that it will be at somewhere around 3,000 or even 6,000 to begin with. It may not sound much, but it is far better than 400 players on average. And years later, I do believe that the numbers will slowly go up and gently be better. But can it get all of its player base back? No, it's practically impossible, but it's a really pretty dream. However, I do genuinely believe that it has the capability of regaining at least 25 to 50% of its player base with a huge update. I have high hopes for the games and the developers themselves, and that hope is something I won't ever let go until the game is actually officially dead, and I do trust that they will make this game great in the future. Firstly, let's talk about the negativity of the game. When Payday 3 was first announced that it was going to be always online mode, I instantly knew that it was going to have a rough start, but I never really understood why they went with this direction without having any sort of like second thought. But the reason they claim that they made this is because of countering cheaters and hackers, but regardless of what you do as a developer, there will always be someone or certain people that will always try and find ways to break through and hack the game, regardless of how much security your game has. It doesn't matter. People will always find a way to break through. Lack of offline mode is something that obviously doesn't really need to be talked about, but we really desperately need it because there's been many instances where I was forced to leave the game because of an internet issue or the servers having some sort of problems, and there were even certain times where my game is lagging because of ping. And having some sort of offline mode is something Payday 3 desperately needs, but because the devs are not really giving us a proper answer on if they are working it or not, puts us in a place where we don't even know if it's actually coming. So having some sort of confirmation from the devs at least makes us know what's going on, but as of now, there's nothing. Secondly, there isn't any sort of option to kick a player whenever you're playing a heist or in a lobby. Because if there is a degenerate that is trolling or intentionally griefing, you and some other players can't really do anything about it besides deal with it, and not having it can cause some sort of issue to some players. Allowing the host or have like some sort of a vote kit can be great to prevent any sort of like hacking or like any sort of like griefing or trolling. But because we don't have it, it's kind of hard to really deal with it. Now, another thing that this is probably going to be forgotten, but a lack of pre-planning is also something the game lacks. Payday 2's pre-planning system wasn't entirely crazy, as you just simply add a few stuff and call it a day, like change the escaping location, change the way you approach a heist, add a medic bag here, add a sniper here, and that's it. Like, it didn't really, like, it had some impact, but it wasn't really that much of a mind-boggle mechanic, but hey, it was still something. Here, I wanted to where we could actually genuinely plan stuff and have like some sort of effect in the future, like if we complete a specific objective, and the next objective after that is far more easier to complete because of a pre-planning we did, and etc, etc. I don't know what else I can change it, but I'll let you guys do with your imagination. Another problem is the unresponsive AI. What do I mean by this is the AI never really listens to you regardless if you tell them to follow you or you tell them to stay, even if you constantly say that to them. The AI for some reason always has this habit of always seeking out and engaging enemies regardless if it's out in the open, and when they do fight them out in the open, they just keep getting down, causing them to put you in a position where you can't really do anything about it besides accept it. So, making the AI be able to listen to your commands and actually respond to your calls needs to be added in order to make it easier for solo players, unless when someone wants to organize their crew. Because there's been so many instances where I want the AI to stay close to me, but because they're constantly spending their time fighting outside or out in the open to the enemies and getting down, puts me in a position where it makes it harder for me to complete the heist. So making the AI actually listen to you is needed. The UI is also a little bit bland and sometimes confusing even for me because there's too much, it's a bit too much box shaped, if that makes any sense. Because there really isn't any sort of like icons or any sort of like indication whenever you're managing your inventory, like some sort of a pistol icon for weapons or like a t-shirt icon for clothing and etc. It's also a little bit unorganized because there's like certain items where they belong in the same category, like favors being close to the stickers and the weapon paint jobs and etc. I feel like them having their own little categories, like stickers and paint jobs having their own little sections and categories and etc. makes it more easier and more understandable. So, another thing that's also a little bit annoying are the enemies. There are no problems with the enemies whatsoever whenever you're playing with friends, but playing against them solo is a little bit annoying because cloakers always know where you are, regardless if they have seen you or not, and on certain occasions their charging sound only activates when you're literally right next to them. So make it where they have to actually search for you in order to begin the charging instead of instantly knowing where you are at all times and kicking you and barely giving you enough time to react. This could be me because I'm like constantly playing solo and, you know, it makes it easier for cloakers to get me. But another problem is zappers and cloakers always prioritize the player even if the team AI are literally next to them. The issue is they can literally just simply run past them and ignore them and incapacitate you easily. So making the cloakers and zappers be targeted by these enemies should make things more bearable and allowing you to save your crew, because having constantly deal with cloakers that are like focusing on you and not the team AI can be a little bit annoying to deal with, especially when they're like literally right next to each other. So make the zappers and cloakers be able to actually target your team AI and not only you. The bulldozers is a dangerous enemy, but they have a really huge problem. They never reload. So far, whenever I've been fighting every bulldozer throughout my 270 hours of Payday 3, I have never seen them reload their gun before. Only like certain like few seconds of stuttering between shots. Because each time I fight against the dozer, it feels like they have like infinite ammo and they never reload, regardless of how many times they shot, which makes it really harder for them to, which makes it harder to fight them at close range. So making them be able to reload their gun should give us an opportunity to fight them or like run away from them, because at the moment they never reload whatsoever. The progression system is also something that needs to be improved drastically in one way or another. Give us daily missions, weekly missions, or even monthly missions to allow us to finish occasionally, or even make us do sometimes. Secondly, the base challenges themselves needs to be far more rewarding and make things more interesting and engaging, as at the moment it kind of feels a little bit tedious because there are like certain heists where it gives out more XP than the actual missions themselves, which is kind of weird to say at least. But lastly, let's leave the negativity behind and talk about the positive sides of the game. Firstly, the core gameplay of the game is fantastic. It's great. It's one of those first-person shooters where it actually feels amazing. Shooting enemies' helmets off feels great, and killing one feels satisfying. Each heist feels very fun and interesting to play for a few times, and they do have some sort of replayability. It's like the core gameplay is so good. It feels great. It's smooth. I love it. The Overkill difficulty feels challenging and engaging. It's not like a difficulty where it makes you want to pull your hair out. It is actually a genuine challenge, especially when it's a final assault. It forces you to actually genuinely think about your next move before you engage an enemy. Otherwise, the enemies will wipe the floor with your fat ass. Anyway, the enemies are really genuinely threatening and interesting to deal with, especially shields, since enemies can actually hide behind them as cover, and every other special enemy is really deadly if they're ignored, like grenadiers, zappers, bulldozers, even every enemy is like deadly. The guns feels great. They're powerful, they're smooth, and the look of the weapon itself looks clean. And yet you have a solid amount of weapons to mess around with, and modifying them a certain way you'll like. And the reason I say that there's a good amount of weapon variety is because 50% of the weapons in Payday 2 are literal duplicates or have one stat that is significantly different from one another. And let's also not mention the fact that 90% of the Payday 2 player base use the same fucking weapons on Descendant's difficulty, and the whole entire time. And they are the same individuals that complain about weapon variety when it's the same degenerate pricks that use the same fucking weapons. I'm getting out of topic. Another thing is the skill system is pretty interesting and has a large variety of builds you can make. If you actually use your imagination and your creativity, there are so many builds that you can actually like mess around with, like a hipfire build only, long range engagements only build, a stun locking build, infinite ammo build, etc, etc. There's so many builds you can like mess around with. The movement is really interesting because it feels very smooth and responsive. Vaulting and sliding especially feels great. There's really not much else to really talk about other than the fact that it feels great and very interesting. It's great. It's just there. Stealthing also feels great, even though I never play stealth. It is a far improvement than in the second game. You are able to complete certain heists without even masking up to begin with, and there are like so many ways you can approach a heist. You want to go through the front door directly, or you want to go through a different way. Like there's so many ways you can finish a specific heist, and you can even do some of the side objectives while you're busy with the main objective. Like there's so many things you can do in stealth. So when it comes to the hostages and the delaying the assault is also a really interesting mechanic, and they've really reworked it relatively well. Firstly, it actually makes the hostages have an actual genuine value, unlike in Payday 2 where it was just a forgettable thing to ignore or just a target to be shooting at because they were just like so forgettable at this point. But being able to sort of delay the assault or being able to trade resources is a great feature because it allows you to either organize the hostages or trade stuff whenever you're in a pinch. Organizing hostages, I mean by like moving them to a specific spot or like hiding them in a little room, because whenever you have a hostage right next to you, it actually makes the cops approach you in a slower pace and makes them use their pistol because they don't want to accidentally shoot the civilians, so they have to use their pistols. And because they use the pistols, they actually deal relatively less damage to you. And it also nerfs the grenadiers entirely because it forces them to throw flashbangs instead of toxic grenades because, well, they don't want to be charged for killing an innocent civilian, so they have to use flashbangs instead of toxic gas grenades. Playing with friends or teammates can also be a really great time, as everyone has their own little purposes and their own little playstyle. Example being on loud, someone focuses on getting the loot or getting the equipment, some are busy with the hostages, and some are just busy doing their own little things, and etc, etc. And those are like busy on using human shields, or those that are focused on fighting far away with a sniper rifle, or some that are like focused on close quarters engagements, and etc, etc. The game has so many ways to be played and many ways to approach a heist. Even if you do some progress in stealth, and when things go loud, those stealth progresses you won't be in waste because there's like so many things to do. And except for you little fucking shit. Anyway, so what's my point? The game itself is so fun, and the replayability is so great. Like, there's so many ways to play the game, and has so many features that are fun and makes the game stand out. However, there are so many features that are also missing and desperately needs to be added in the future. But I do trust that Starbreeze will add these in the future. I'm putting my trust and hope on Starbreeze that they will be able to save the game from death. Because right now Payday 3 is on its final stand. And for Starbreeze, it's now or never. But I will remain hopeful, regardless of what happens. I do trust that Payday 3 will rise and become better in the future.